So, evolutionary theories. Big Bang, some serious problems. Where's all the mass? I think last month we talked about baryonic matter. That's atoms, what we know of atoms. As far as the secular cosmogonists can tell, we only know where 5% of the universe is. The other 95% is dark matter, dark energy. Can't prove that either exist, but they have to be there. There's not enough mass in the universe. Star formation, not enough time to form. While star formation could happen, they need a lot more than 13 billion years, which is the current estimate, 13.77 billion. Galaxy formation. Webb is destroying the theories of how things form, in particular galaxies. You need to understand what they believe about origins is affecting everything they do, including their research. And they think that the universe is expanding. Why, they won't admit it, but why the universe is expanding every direction from the Earth is kind of interesting. But in any way, at the end of the day, 13.1 billion years is what Webb can look out with its infrared technology. So the estimate is that those are young galaxies. They happened right after the Big Bang. It takes billions of years for a structure like the Milky Way to evolve. So when they look back, they expect to see baby galaxies and baby stars. God has a sense of humor. That's not what's out there. Okay? The galaxies are just as mature as ours, and some of them are bigger. So at the end of the day, all the theories are under serious stress. Galaxy formation, solar formation, star formation, they're all under serious stress because we are not finding what we wanted out there, what they thought they wanted. And at the end of the day, remember, there's supposed to be a single large black hole at the center of the Milky Way. Now they think there's about 100 million black holes in the Milky Way. Most of them are small, but nothing out there is what they thought. Now, part of this is the Webb sees in infrared. And we're looking in visible light. In infrared, most of the universe is shouting in infrared. Most of the electromagnetic radiation out there is in fact infrared. And the part that's not is gamma, and we don't want that anyway. Gamma radiation's deadly to us. We don't want anywhere near it. Whoops. Solar system. We have large gas giants. So this is all from the last one, so you're getting a freebie here. But the gas giants are, they're finding out when they find other solar systems elsewhere that have planets, the gas giants are all close to the sun. We're the only one that has gas giants away from the sun. Nobody can figure out how that happened. So that's a problem. And now there are things called jumbos. I hope you hear about them. Jumbo. The U is little because they're Jupiter mass binary objects. There are now 24 mass binary objects in the nebula, the Orion Nebula, just below the belt of Orion, right near the Trapezian cluster. Right there, 12. They're about 100,000 light years apart, and they're orbiting each other. These are planets the size of Jupiter that are not orbiting a sun. They're orbiting each other. They have no idea. They are absolutely, completely mystified how they could have even been formed, why they're doing that, and there's lots of them there. So this is, I just chuckle because this is God's sense of humor, right? They think they got it figured out, and then he says, well, what about this? The law of abiogenesis, we talked about the Cambrian explosion 350 million years ago. Life just appeared. You look at the rocks below it, there's nothing. On the surface in the Cambrian explosion, there are trilobites. Trilobites have ommatidia. We're going to talk about ommatidia in respect to dragonflies in a few minutes. But ommatidia are unbelievably complex. Life started off complex right at the beginning. Where did the information come from? And of course, the image of God. So this is actually put out by National Science Foundation. This is not a creationist idea. It's the idea that, boy, You know, when you start looking at the subatomic level, and then the atomic level, and then you get to molecular, cellular, tissue, organs, etc., and you keep going, and ultimately you end up to the cosmos, how come it all works together? How come each part is interoperable with all the other parts? This would be like go to a junkyard. Go ahead and get a transmission from Ford and get a motor from Toyota. Good luck. You know? And the idea here is there's just this unbelievable, it's called the biocomplexity spiral. This is a secular idea, but I agree with it. Why does this all work together? It shouldn't. And so the issue is, it's called a series of beneficial accidents or a master craftsman. Right? So just think about that. So this is one of the new theories I told you I'd share with you. This theory is about 2 weeks old. I don't think it's going to last 2 more weeks, but it's called the law of increasing functional information. It says that complex system in nature evolved to become more complex. That complexity yields complexity. That's generally not the case. Our understanding is complexity yields chaos, and it degrades. It's called increasing entropy, second law of thermodynamics. This new law identifies universal concepts of selection, that word we get out of evolution, that drive systems to evolve. So the systems are now driven to evolve. Who drives? That's a concept of will, purpose, goal. Where does that come from? That's the personification of the universe itself. Whether they're living or not. So not only living stuff, but dead stuff is animated to do these things. It addresses the tendency for natural systems in the universe to become more complex over time. Exactly the opposite of anything ever observed. The new law states that the functional information of a system will increase, the system will evolve, if many different configurations of the system undergo selection for one or more functions. That just says we can't explain it, so it's getting more complex. That's what it says. So, second law of thermodynamics is entropy is defined as increasing disorder. The second law may be formulated by the observation that entropy of isolated systems, the universe, left to spontaneous evolution, cannot decrease. I know everything is in negatives. I didn't write the scientific laws. But I will tell you what that means is everything degrades. Leave a car in your garage for 10 years, see if it starts. You haven't done anything to it. You haven't used it at all. Leave a teenager's room. You think it's going to increase in complexity? I don't think so. Everything degrades. Language degrades. English has one word for love. I love my cat. I love that show. I love my wife, right? Greek has 4 words for love at least. Hebrew has 3 concepts for it. The idea is even language is degrading, right? There's 16,000 English words. There are only 5,600 Hebrew. Which one do you think tells you more? At the end of the day, everything degrades. Take a USB, put it in your computer, and then copy it 1,000 times. I guarantee you something will be corrupted. It can't go on forever in the same state, let alone increase in complexity. So the first law, just as a curiosity, allows a cup to fall off the table, hit the floor, and smash into many pieces, right? But it would also allow for that to happen in reverse. It would. It would allow all the pieces to come up, just like in the cartoons, and reform. The second law says that can't happen. We're in a river of time. Time is one way, one directional. That's what God says too. So the second law needs to be paired with the first law, conservation of energy, mass, etc. So anyway, because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither can it be. They will continue to come up with new challenges to anything we say about order, God being involved, etc. Remember, the definition of science in our culture is natural means that I can observe. And the gods of our culture right now are materialism and scientism. Has nothing to do with God of the Bible. So God created. God has a purpose. It's deliberate intent, not mindless. Earth was specifically created to support life. Isaiah 45:18. I am the Lord, there is no other. I did not create the earth in vain. I created it to be inhabited. He says that about exactly nothing else in the universe, other than maybe heaven. He doesn't say he created it to be inhabited, but we know it is. Okay? So at the end of the day, he says earth was created that way. And what we find in order for that to happen, I just challenge you. Where else in the universe is the universe hospitable to human life? Nowhere. And when you realize the amount of complexity God put into the design of the earth and the solar system and then the Milky Way and where it's located, nothing accidental about that. It supports life because it was designed to support life, not because of some accident. Life reflects a common designer. Yes, wings look like hands and flippers. Okay? But that doesn't mean they were all descended from the same thing. They all came from the same engineer. The idea that you adapt doesn't surprise me at all. I like to spread the idea of the biotic message. And it's the idea, biotic meaning living. Life is designed to reveal the common designer. God says it is. You can tell about him from what's been made, and you're without excuse. So life is designed to reveal him. Life is designed to resist any other naturalist interpretation. So at the end of the day, that's why Scripture says they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. They willfully forget. They follow cleverly designed fables, right? And then some of them are just plain deceived. But at the end of the day, many of them are not deceived, but rather in a form shaking their fist. This is not accidental either, right? The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but spiritual, taking down the strongholds set up against the knowledge of God. Engineered adaptability is the information needed, as well as the genetic, metabolic, sensory, and information processing systems necessary for adaptive change is built in. You don't need any help from anything else. It's all built in. And your body will respond, as you know. It's very resilient. So information has to have all these things: apologetics, pragmatics, and semantic syntax, and statistics. I'll show you an example of that rather than try to explain it. But information is information. This is critical. Neither matter nor energy. Information has no mass. You know what else has no mass? Light. Light has no mass. Information is massless. Information always depends on the will of a sender. Information does not arise from any property in matter or any process in nature. There is nothing that we know of that creates information. So there's no known law through which matter can give rise to information. Neither is there any physical process or material phenomenon. So there was a $2 million thing. This was set out there in 1997. I just showed you the theory that came out this year. He's looking to collect on the money. So he's got a theory that, no, matter creates this information. So good luck for him. So the background of this is important. A code system is always the result of a mental process. DNA is an elegant code. Light itself is an elegant code. 8 kinds of information in a beam or a wave of light. It should be emphasized that neither matter nor natural processes are able to generate codes. Right? Codes are a sentient or sapient response. You have to have a mind to create a code. And in the background, there's a library. That's not an accident. That library is full of information, and I ask you, which natural process put any one of the ideas in any one of those books? None. I'm not saying all the information is good, but I'm saying information requires a mind. And where did the information come from? Well, we have a pretty good idea, but the secularist really struggles with that one. So 2 passages describe a vital characteristic of all creation. Psalm 19:1. Again, we've talked about this, but the firmament shows his handiwork, and we are understood by the things that are made, which is basically workmanship in Ephesians 2:10. So numerous other passages also give the same message. For instance, in the Psalms, the work of your fingers. He made humans to have dominion over the work of his hands. He says his hands formed things in Psalm 95. Psalm 102, he laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. I meditate on all your works. I muse on the work of your hands. When something is repeated over and over and over in Hebrew, there's a word for that. And you know, it's important. It's really important. And all I did was look in the Psalms here. I'm sure you could do a search and find all kinds of references. And one of the things we're held accountable to is understanding workmanship. We understand innately human workmanship, and God says you can see his workmanship because we're made in his image. We're allowed to see that. So God, his fingerprint is visible in the molecules of life. So DNA is made up of 4 nucleotides. And they're arranged in 20 words. They're called amino acids. And these things are put together in unbelievable combinations to create about 30 million different proteins. And so that's information. That's a code set. So all the elements of information, purpose is there, meaning, code sets, action, and signal. So anyway, we have all the information or all the attributes of information just in DNA. All you have to do is look in a microscope. Understand, by the way, these are the same scientists that are looking in there and say it happened by accident. But when we spend billions of dollars on radio telescopes looking into space, you know what they're looking for? Non-coded, non-random coded information. What's DNA? Non-random, it's definitely not random, coded information. So they can look there and they can say, oh, that's natural. And they can say in space, oh, we could tell if there's aliens there by the same method. I mean, just think about how twisted their minds are. So, information is not created by the natural world. You cannot find information created by time, space, matter, energy. All the elements of the universe in Genesis 1:1. You will not find explosions or expansions. I called it that instead of the Big Bang because some of my Big Bang friends really object to the Big Bang description. They call it the expansion. But expansions still don't create information. Mutations of DNA or RNA, there's no information created there. Maybe information lost, but there's nothing new created. Stars, planets, moons, meteors, comets, or coronal mass ejections. To some of my hippie friends, you know, this upsets them. But the fact of the matter is, you don't get new information from any of those sources either. And then you got weather, environmental pressure, sun, wind, and water, earthquakes. There's no information. Information is created by sapient minds. Period. We know of no other source for information. Everything is based on information. Everything. That, again, is just loaded with information. I happen to like the library. I've been trying to get my wife to go for this, but I'm not saying it's all good. I'm just saying none of it was accidental. It's a perfect example. That happens to be in the Czech Republic. Let's talk about animal behaviors. Migration. So, animals on the move, land, sea, and air. You got purpose. Sometimes it's propagation, that's reproduction. Food, survival. We've got methods of migration. Magnetic field, chemical imprinting, olfactory, that means smell. Sun, moons, and stars are all used as guides. Dung beetles use the Milky Way itself. Great story if I have time to tell it. Specialized physical attributes, new structures, physical enhancements. In other words, animals that go through migration are not the same as when they're not migrating. The monarch is the best example. Monarch is 4 generations. Great-great-great-grandchild comes back from the one who went down to Mexico, and the one who comes back isn't even physiologically the same. It lives 5 times longer, it weighs 40% more, it doesn't reproduce, at least not on the trip. It's made for an incredibly different journey. And so every 4th generation, I don't know, somewhere God put in the instructions in the monarch DNA, certain things get turned on, certain things get turned off. Another great example of epigenetic control. The DNA of the monarch did not change. What was expressed, the proteins that were made, how the metabolism works, all controlled by epigenetic, all controlled by information, code sets. We call it instinct, but God has a more elegant name for it, I think. Specialized neurological attributes, path integration abilities. I might get there, I might not. Life cycle adjustments. The monarch is one of them. Big life cycle adjustments. The dragonflies I'm going to tell you about in a minute. 5 generations. Dragonflies are the world's fastest insects. I was stunned by this. They can go up to 35 miles an hour. That's pretty fast. I mean, a human running maybe 6, 7 miles an hour, you know. Most humans, when they're walking, about 3. For me, about 1, you know. So at the end of the day, this comes from a creature that weighs less than 3/100ths of an ounce. Nothing. By the way, it has 4 articulated wings. The organization of a dragonfly that I can't get through today is stunning. The actual engineering of the dragonfly itself. They're amazing flyers, 2 forms of wings. They can do all manner of maneuvers as traveling straight up, down, backwards, flying, etc., etc. They are perhaps the deadliest hunter in the animal world. 95% of the time they get a hit, and they get all their hits on the fly. Dragonflies eat other things that are flying. You have any idea how hard that is? I'm going to show you how he does it. It's relatively amazing engineering. Dragonflies have the flexibility to switch between in-phase and out-of-phase flapping. So he can run he's got 2 sets of wings. He can run them together, or he can run them opposite each other. Pretty amazing. Dragonflies have nearly 360-degree vision and can carry 1/3 of its body weight without impacting its ability to fly or its speed. 1/3. I mean, think about that. If a human 180 pounds carrying something 60 pounds, that would affect us a lot. It gives you a little idea of the underlying structure of the dragonfly at 3/100ths of an ounce. Engineers have long recognized their ability to do something called motion camouflage. This is actually stunning. They had to use high-speed cameras, but the dragonfly has an ability to move in a way, this is when it puts its wing in counter motion. It looks to whoever's observing it like it's standing still, so it doesn't fly away. That's why the dragonfly wins so often. The prey doesn't realize it's flying towards it. It's called motion camouflage. They're not the only ones with it. Octopus have it too. So, dragonflies, this happens to be in the US. In February, you can see they're concentrated down here in the south, like some of us. Florida, Texas, the whole bit. Okay? And then they fly north, you can see they move north about March. They start the journey north, and they're up north through August. And then they go, in September and October, they move back down. And then and the reason those are shown, even though they're in the same spot, each one of those clicks is a different generation. So I'll go back. So in February, the first generation takes off. Second generation lives up there for about 5 months. Then this generation comes down and lasts 2 months, and then 2 more months before they head back north. So who told great-grandchild where to go? How do they navigate? How do they know where to go? And then how do they know how to get there? So anyway, turns out it's incredibly complex. And it has to do with their ability to measure light. They also can measure temperature, et cetera, and they actually, we think, have the ability to measure stable isotope concentration in rainwater. The idiot that spent their life figuring that out, I feel sorry for him, but I'm glad I could share it with you. But at the end of the day, God has equipped them with all manner of ability to sense the environment for various things that means something, that turns on or off histones or methylation processes and causes changes. And each generation has something else added or subtracted, and each generation gets different building instructions for proteins, which affects their function, and ultimately they pass this along. This all has to be coded. It all has to be there. Where did the information come from? Right? That doesn't evolve. It doesn't emerge from matter. So, let me give you the most extraordinary story, and that's the migration of dragonflies from the southern part of India to Mozambique, Africa, across the Indian Ocean. 5 generations. I want you to read what's in the textbook. A globe skimmer, that's the form of dragonfly we're talking about, aiming to succeed. Dragonflies don't aim to succeed. Dragonflies do or they don't as they're genetically programmed to do. Right? Dragonflies don't aim to succeed. As they aim to succeed at migrating over the ocean, they have to adapt. So they have this need to be able to select favorable winds. Okay, but the favorable winds come at a certain time of year. And there's an indication when those winds are going to come. We don't know what all the indications are yet, but one of those things is similar to the favorable isotope ratio in rainfall. And the winds are coming as soon as a certain threshold is met. We have things like that. And at the end of the day, the dragonfly is informed. Its DNA is informed about the environmental pressure or the environmental opportunity. The dragonfly decides nothing. The dragonfly is doing exactly what it was programmed to do, especially during autumn. I need you to understand, they wrote this here knowing full well that's the only time these winds occur is during autumn. Like somehow there's just some special thought in the idea of a dragonfly. I just want you to know how ridiculous the stuff being taught to your kids is. And once you personify this stuff, ideas or animals, then you can give them any human trait you want. And nobody thinks anything of it. Remember, our adversary is the cleverest of all the creatures. Many insects that are considered pests, what we find out, these rice plant hoppers are called, the fall armyworm. It turns out that this migration pattern essentially puts the dragonflies where it's natural pest control, because that's where the pests are going to be. That means that's where the food is going to be. And it turns out, this is the circle, but it turns out we find these dragonflies in all these places. And so this cycle feeds the dragonflies, those populations, and those populations essentially are God's natural pest control. Now, I know this all happened by accident. We just got lucky, right? Well, I mean, this is what they're telling you. And they do it over and over and over again until this is the norm. This is the way nature works. These attributes aren't learned. The average dragonfly, by the way, lives about 6 months. So he doesn't live to see any of this cycle. It took a human made in the image of God who who understands concepts that could then study this, do it over long periods of time, and discern what God had already planned. Right? Einstein, and I'm not sure he was a believer, but he constantly talked about thinking God's thoughts after him. That's part of what the image of God gives you, is that ability to think God's thoughts after him. In almost every book, documentary, and internet search, dragonflies are explained as a result of naturalistic evolutionary things, and they're random. Right? This is just, something that happened in nature. This means, I want you to understand what they're telling your kids. This means they're saying that a no-mind process is more brilliant than our most brilliant people on the mind. In other words, our sapience holds not a candle to the natural instincts and intelligence of the universe itself. That's what they're saying. Because they even write it down. We aren't smart enough to design things. We just let evolution do the hard work, and then we figure out what happened. And like it is the theory. Why evolution is the Picasso of science. I actually think that's a good description. This is what evolution points out. Absolute random chaos. But esteemed biologist Michael Levin, the reason he is esteemed is because he postulated a theory that goes against the wisdom of God. In the wisdom of God, the DNA double helix is left-handed. All bonds are left-handed. In nature, it should be an even distribution of right-handed and left-handed bonds. Don't have time to go into the example, but if you understand football, you got a tight end on one side. That's called the strong side. Consider molecules that way. Left-handed or right-handed just means that the tight end moved to one end or the other end. Most molecules that cause anything worthwhile to happen are asymmetrical. Everything, electricity, magnetism, everything works on asymmetrical properties. That's the way God designed the universe. So there's this idea of handedness. It's called chirality. Every bond in your body is left-handed. Every one of them. What happened to all the right-handed bonds? Right-handed bonds are actually deadly to you. God did it because he's got a sense of humor. Honestly, there's no explanation for how life is only left-handed bonds. Okay? So he got his PhD by attempting, even the secularists say he attempted to explain chirality. That's left-handed bonds. So he's a hero in their world because he has tried to give them an explanation for something that is unexplainable, literally. Life contains only left-handed bonds in a world of random bonds. So he's got this incredible metabolic and physiological adaptation by the process of evolution itself. Evolution gets elevated to the source of knowledge. Evolution is personified. You kind of see get what I'm saying? He is saying here, but evolution, on the other hand, doesn't just produce specific changes, specific challenges. Instead, it creates what he calls problem-solving machines. These machines are made up of incredible hierarchical biological hardware. You know what that is? That's the human cell. That's the body. I'll show it to you on the next page. So he's taken God's creations and he's reinterpreting them as a solution created by evolution itself. And so it's no wonder our kids believe in mysticism and magic and stuff. That's what this is. Form of dark magic. Contrary to commonly held ideas about evolution, it doesn't just search for the best possible physical characteristics in organism. It uses signals and behaviors to shape how organisms function. Signals and behaviors, metabolic processes, DNA, messenger RNA, etc., etc. This is what's being taught. And at the end of the day, there's a delinking from reality to this mystical world. And in this mystical world, any story goes. After all, it's fiction. That is hierarchical hierarchical biological hardware. That's a human cell. And that's the human body, the major organs. They traded the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served the creation rather than the Creator. It's Romans 1:25. That section starts with the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And this is what he doesn't like. We know we serve a jealous God, and he's not about to have his attributes put onto the creation. And we are not to be worshiping the creation, and that's essentially what personification of nature is. It's an idol set up. So, these are ommatidia. Those are the eyes of a dragonfly. Ommatidia are found in shrimp, flies, trilobites, and ommatidia are the same today as apparently they were 350 million years ago during the Precambrian explosion. Ommatidia are now found in insects, crustaceans, and millipedes. And ommatidia, I want you to think in terms of your computer or your TV screen in pixels. Each ommatidia is a pixel. It's not an exact match, but I want you to get the idea. Each ommatidia has an axon, that's a nerve bundle, has 6 to 9 axons. Each one has 6 to 9 nerve bundles in it. One picture element. So an ommatidia gives to the dragonfly, in my example, one shot at that picture. The dragonfly has 60,000 of them, 30,000 on each eye. So it is now going to process 60,000 images at the same time. And its refresh rate is 8 times a second. So the dragonfly can see pretty good. Okay. He also has 3 ocelli on the top of his head. These are things that can determine circadian rhythms like light. So they're not eyes per se, but he can definitely tell if there's shadow or anything above him, right? Circadian rhythm, light rhythms. So he's got 3 of those on the top, and that's why you can't surprise a dragonfly very often. You just can't. Not only that, he's got unbelievable hearing. But you take that, this dragonfly is a remarkable example of engineer. Up to 30,000 ommatidia per eye. The ommatidia is an unbelievably complex thing, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. I know you trust me by now. The fact of the matter is these things are just a study in themselves. And ommatidia is unbelievably complicated. It has the ability to resolve wavelength, so the wave properties of light. It can also handle the particle properties of light, which means it can detect photons, which are a piece of electromagnetic energy. So at the end of the day, these ommatidia, they're filled with things called rhabdomes, and they can do all of this. This is in the eye of a dragonfly. So now I've got 60,000 images coming in 8 times a second. So first thing comes in up here in the lamina, and then it goes down to the medulla and the lobular plate. Those process on both sides, and that processing gets sent to the brain. So there's 3 processing centers for signals on each side before it gets to the brain, because the brain's going to drive the output. All these systems are, let's just say, mind-numbingly complex. And man does a lot of studying of dragonflies. It's called biomimicry. And a lot of our ideas come out of nature. Now, that's interesting. An accident. Engineers are supposed to design their stuff based on accidental things? It doesn't even make sense. So, I have this dragonfly, and it has this sensory perception. It has the 5 eyes, 2 are ommatidia loaded, and one's got 3 ocelli. I have antenna, mandibles, optic lobes, and olfactory input. So all that input comes in. That input gets driven through very, very complicated neurons. So there are narrowband, broadband, and color opponent neurons. So each one of those bundles has different kinds of signal carriers in it. Okay, I know this is all an accident. It's easy to believe. And then that goes through these 4 processing antenna. 3 of them I showed you in the antenna lobe. Also has some neuron processing. All goes to the central brain, which then gives the premotor and motor areas the response time. So that a dragonfly, 95% of the time, can fly and catch its prey. Its prey almost doesn't have any chance at all. And so all of that is put together in a system that looks like this. I could give you all the pieces. I don't mean you, I mean somebody qualified. Well, I don't mean it quite that way. What I mean is, it's all right, maybe I meant it that way, but no. The issue is here, you could be, it's like the 747. You could be given all these parts and you couldn't put this system together. No way. So when you look at this, you know, I know it's a lowly dragonfly, but is this a result of random development or a purposeful design? Just a dragonfly. Okay, sanctify the Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give an answer to every man that asks you the reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. That's the reason we cover this stuff. Let me finish on this. 1859, Darwin publishes Origin of Species, which, by the way, has nothing to do with origins, right? Only where species came from, not where life came from. He never even purported to talk about that. Darwin was wrong. It's just that simple. Mutations of the genotype in the DNA are not the primary driver of differentiation of morphology, that means form, or the phenotype appearance. That's just wrong. It's not right. It turns out that Mendel was right. Remember Gregory Mendel from genetics class? And Mendel said essentially an allele manipulation. He didn't use those words, and he didn't have all the knowledge we do today, but he essentially said allele manipulation. It's through manipulation of the inherited characteristics from the DNA. He didn't say the DNA got changed or ruined in any way. It's just it got combined, and some things show up and some things don't. So his observations were right. My personal opinion about this is every time this comes out into the world, God will send a Mendel. He'll give you the truth. It'll be out there. Seek me and you'll find me. And he says that we don't understand these things except by faith. So we have to understand that can't be right because that doesn't square with Scripture. And that denies Jesus Christ, the Creator. And Gregory Mendel, while I maybe didn't understand it, it maybe doesn't explain it, but it didn't deny Jesus Christ. And so at the end of the day, you need to have a natural inclination where you'll give the weight in that direction. It's pretty much that simple, because your kids are going to be challenged with things every day. And I will tell you that if you're a specialist in medical care in this country, take orthopedics, you realize you have to read a peer-reviewed study every 18 seconds to stay up on your craft. It's not possible. It's Daniel 12:4. Knowledge will increase. Daniel, seal up the books until the time, right? The knowledge will increase, and it's absolutely exploding in every area. And if we don't prepare our kids with principles based on biblical standards and the idea of the Berean, right? Bring everything that they're told back to Scripture. Doesn't mean Scripture is going to answer every science question. It's not. But it's going to point to Jesus Christ as Creator, as Savior, as Judge. And He is coming again. And we are going to be judged for this stuff. And so at the end of the day, if all we do is alert them that you need to be Berean, well, to be Berean, you got to read Scripture. good idea to go to church and maybe get in some Bible studies too, but at the least, you got to read the Bible. And I heard some horrifying statistics about the fact of, even fundamentalist churches aren't really reading their Bibles very much anymore compared to the way it used to be. So I'll just tell you that I believe that's there. We know Mendel was right, that it's about allele manipulation because the DNA doesn't change. But we do find methylation, genes being turned on and off. That's how a grasshopper becomes a locust, right? Some things were turned on and off. The DNA wasn't changed. The ability to be a locust was always there. There are repressive and active histones. There's messenger RNA, non-coding RNA. You don't need DNA to create all coding for proteins. And then there's something I didn't talk about at all tonight, chromatin remodeling complexes. So we're finding all manner of issues that essentially God uses these mechanisms to essentially drive our adaptation. And so the adaptation comes from within us, and it's all pre-built in. God's given you the ability to react to all manner of changes in the environment, etc. So I thank you very much for your time.